Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Nahmaduhu wa nasalli ala rasulihil kareem. Okay, so today we're going on to induction. So let's have a quick, not too deep recap, but a bit recap. So we finish our individual words, definitions, and that kind of stuff. Then we had inference, where it can either be direct or indirect. Direct inference means from one sentence, one proposition, we deduce other information. And there were different ways of deducing information. One was conversion. We can convert within a conversion table. Then obversion, the subject complement, and we make an A into an E and an I into an O. Correct? Then we have contradictory, which a contradiction is a logical fallacy. So therefore, if one is true, the other has to be false. One is false, the other has to be true. Then we did subaltern, moving downwards. Then we had contrary, we had subcontrary. Then we moved on to indirect inference. What does indirect inference mean? When you have two sentences or two propositions, and from those two propositions we deduce new information. This is called This is called what? Indirect inference. Now in deduction, what do? We have categorical syllogisms. What's the first one? And in there we have major term, minor term, middle term, the sughra, the kubra, the hadd al-awsat, hadd al-asghar, hadd al-akbar. Correct? And then we get the natija and the conclusion. Then we have hypothetical syllogism. If then this. And then we said here, we can have the mixed hypothetical or pure hypothetical. A pure hypothetical is basically like a syllogism. You just move the middle term and we get a fresh hypothetical syllogism. And the mix, we have what you can affirm the antecedent or deny the consequent. But you can't deny the antecedent or confirm the consequent. Then we did disjunctive syllogism. When we said or, we have when you have disjunctive is either where the first preposition gives options. And those options are going to have what? Three types of relationships. What's this? A strong disjunct or a weak disjunct, and the third one is no name. And the Arabic name is what? A strong disjunct is what? Maniyatul jam'i wal khulubi, or maniyatul jam'i or maniyatul khulu. These are the three possibilities. Yes? A maniyatul jam'i wal khulubi, if you affirm one, then automatically not the other. You negate the other, then it's not going to be the first. You can do it both ways. In maniyatul jam'i, it can't be both. So if it's one, it can't be the other. Maniyatul khulu, if it's one, you can't affirm the other because it can be jama'. Yes? And then we have conduct. We didn't do this, we'll leave this up for now, inshallah. Now we're moving on to induction. Now I mentioned to you before that in deduction, we are looking at something. I think scientists don't really like this. Scientific. It's more of a logic and like scientists don't really go down deduction. They like induction. What does induction mean? And from here called empirical evidence. What does this mean? That we use known data to deduce something. So in deduction, we don't have to analyze something. In deduction, what we're saying is, if this is a property of something, automatically all of the members of this category will possess this characteristic. Are you following? So if we say, for example, by definition, a British person is one who has British citizenship. We don't have to go and interview every single person. We don't have to look at the data records. We know a British person by definition is what? Someone who has citizenship in Britain. So then we can deduce from this. And induction is when we look at the material we know of. And from this we make what? Make a conclusion. See the difference? Yeah. So therefore, what is science based on? Deduction or induction? Induction. So therefore, science can be wrong. And that's why many times over history, science keeps on changing. As new information comes to light, things keep changing. You understand? Yes? There's one time, one person, what he used to do is that he used to get rod, and I think he used to put up the eyes, between the eyes. If you put something between the eyes, actually space. So he used to put it up and he used to hit the prefrontal cortex. That's where basically a lot of your cognitive behaviors thing. So he used to do that, and he used to mash up like the brains, but to change the behavior. So for example, that drug addiction, that would go away. Or different things. So he got a thing for that once. A Nobel Prize. And later on this guy's doing nonsense. So as we learn stuff, science can change, because this is based on induction. We look at more information and more data we gather, we can come to a conclusion. Are you following? But deduction is what? Is something which we analyze, we understand the category. We understand this is the essence of this category. Are you following? Yes? So for example, if I said to you, for example, fasting. Now, if I said a fast, so every person who fasted, we know they've abstained from what? What's the essence of fasting? Abstain from eating, drinking, cohabitation. So now we don't have to analyze, okay, what's the ruling of Muharram? What's a Muharram fast? What's a Ramadan fast? What's a Zil Qa'dah fast? Because by definition, we know that the essence of a fast is abstain from these three. Are you following? So we just know this by definition, by understanding what fast is. Are you following? As opposed to induction. So for example, how many people fasted? Did everyone fast or not? We have to look at individual data. Are you following me? This is called induction. Okay, and we have analogy. That's the last part. Again, this is a brief introduction. Obviously, all of these have a lot more information. So let me look at this one. All players in West Indies cricket team are nationals of a country within the West Indies. Do you agree with the conclusion? How have we made this conclusion? Based on what?
Because they only pick people who are of citizenship. Is a group of countries.
Yeah, so?
In which?
So is our conclusion, is it deduction or induction?
Deduction.
Why is it deduction?
Because to play in the West Indies, you have to be from.
Yeah, so by definition, a West Indian cricketer, by definition, entails that he was a resident or national of one of these West Indian countries. So now, when I have this, I put the scorecard in front of you. I can't remember all these names, it's way beyond my time. I just remember Shidnar Chandapal. He was an old doho that time. None of these guys know these. Anyways, right? No, Sami as well, he's recent. The rest I don't know. But anyways, yes? So do we have to go down the biography of all of these and say, well, are these all West Indians? We can deduce that just by being on the West Indies team, a West Indian team is made of West Indian players. And a West Indian player, by definition, a person who is a West Indian national. Correct? So now this is deduction. Correct? 100% for sure. Now, if I said all West Indies players scored more than 10 runs, and I come to this conclusion. Look, they all scored more than 10. 22, 57, 61, 61, 103, 21, 22. What is this? Induction. Now, it's a definition that you have to, so now let's say for example, I looked at 10 players and I come to the conclusion, or let's say for example, we do it another way. Let's say, I should have done this before, but let's say for example, I said, look, we have, now in this example, how many players do we have? 1 to 11, yes? It's 11 of them. Is this induction complete or incomplete? Complete. Because why is it complete? With only 11 players, we have analyzed all 11. So obviously a complete, so it's not by definition, but by a complete induction, we have come to know that what? That every single batsman on this team, in this innings, scored more than 10 runs, even though they lost the match eventually. Yes? I'll check that on Cricket Info. You following? Yes? This is one of the few occasions where every single player scored more than 10 runs, about 10 or 11 times at this. Are you following? You got it? So this induction is equal to, is same as deduction, because deduction by definition applies to everybody, and this induction is complete. So now we have full, yes? But let's say, for example, we say, let's take out his player, let's take out his score. What kind of induction is that going to be? Incomplete induction. So there's a possibility of what? Yeah, we can say, well, 10 people have made it, because we can probably try to make a conclusion that all the West Indian batsmen, well, if you know the score, we can probably subtract and figure out by mass in it. But you get what I'm saying? It's called incomplete induction. So in Arabic, it's called istiqra'un. What's it called? So induction is called istaqara yastaqari'u istiqra'un. Meaning what? Induction. To analyze data, empirical evidence. If you have to analyze every single member or every single what? Person or juz of that category, it's called a complete induction. And if you said here, an incomplete induction is called istiqra'un tam, istiqra'un naqis. Are you following? So let's say, for example, let me ask you a question. If I said to you, all the shops on the street sell items, what is that? Huh? Why is it deduction? All shops.
Yeah, because the shop is.
Yeah, by definition, a shop is something that sells something, either a service or a product. But if I say that all buildings on the street have 2 doors, that's induction. Why? Because a building to have two doors is not part of its essence. It's not what is defined. You following? That's induction. And if you've analyzed every single house, that's going to be called what? Istiqra'un tam. And if you've only analyzed some of them, it's called what? Istiqra'un naqis. You following? So let's say, for example, if we say, for example, a person, a human being, is born by mother and father. What's this?
Induction.
Is it deduction or induction? Huh?
That's induction. It's induction. Because of based on what? That's sort of a definition, though. So it's not.
It's induction.
It's induction because
It's
you've seen it.
It's induction, because every time you've seen every person is born via this. A human being is not. Its essence of a human being is something else. It's not to have two parents. So is it so? So even scientifically, they can't. The miracle of Isa's birth is not within our. We've never come across such a scenario. If you Google it, there's actually some animals that are born without with only one genes. Do you know what it's like? Only one of a mother. They don't need both species. Yeah, so we don't even need those things. But if you can have that one species, meaning why can't we have it somewhere else? So even induction. So it's induction. So every single situation that we witness, it has this as a case. But you can't scientifically disprove that Isa's son was not born with two, because it's induction. It's not induction. So that one scenario you have a witness, so you can't say that. Are you following? You get what I'm saying? Okay. Now, based on this concept of induction, we have a few fallacies. They're kind of, it's obviously the form. It's not really a formal fallacy, but it's a fallacy. For example, look, we have here, called the Black-swan Fallacy. So, what's the Black-swan Fallacy? Initially, in Europe, I think so, they never seen what they never seen? A black swan. So by definition, or what they understood was, not the definition, but the color of a swan is not its essence, is it? It's not like what a swan is defined by. It's like a property of it. But every single swan that they saw was white. So to believe in a black swan was what? It's just illogical. They don't have black swans until I think Australia they found it when they first went over to there. So they call it Black-swan Fallacy, which means what? Is that because it has not occurred in your experience, it cannot occur. Are you following? Because you've never seen this thing, it can't be true. So even that's a very unscientific approach. Because we don't know about it, therefore, it's not, it can't be true. Well, yes? Another recognize is because it has always been away in our mind, therefore it has to be this. Or every swan I've ever seen is white, therefore there's no black swans. You following?
Yeah.
So you got it? Okay. Why is that induction fallacy? Because you're basing your statement that all swans are white, the conclusion that swans are white is based on induction, and that induction is what? Naqis. Well, you can say, well, swans in Europe, swans in our country, swans in our lake are all white. But you can't make a ruling on the entire, because you haven't done istiqra of the entire genes. Are you following? You haven't done istiqra, and you haven't done induction of all members of the category. You got it? The next one is a similar. Why? It's called an argument from ignorance or appeal to ignorance. It's because we don't have evidence, therefore it's not true. Or we don't have evidence to the contrary, therefore it can't be true. Again, it's what induction. Now we have not found evidence, therefore there is no evidence. So for example, atheists, they put this card. There's no evidence, so it can't be. So what's the argument? There's no evidence for God. That's what we say there is evidence, but they don't accept evidence. إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. If a person ponders, they can. So even those people who are really thinking, they say what's hard. Even those atheists who are really thinking, they say, nah, they jump the gun and say, oh, they don't want to believe in Abrahamic God. But forget that. Do you believe that did there even any of the hard? Not taking anybody's name, take anybody's names. So you start looking at them. But generally, even the ones that all of them have said, we can't scientifically deny that there's some external being which caused the world. They don't say that. But anyway, so one of the arguments that they do because there's no evidence for God. So what's the counter argument? Is the same.
There's no evidence that there's not.
There's no, yeah. So if you want to use this, there's no evidence for God, so God can't exist. This is a type of induction that within our empirical evidence, our analysis, we've tried, meaning and their way of thinking, they mean so. They say no, we don't accept this premise. For you, because we say, well, Allah's creation is a sign. Allah's creation is a sign. Allah's, all of the things we can see is a sign. But there's no seeing, hearing, touching, smelling. What's the fifth sense? I've got tasting, that's what, yeah. But this is what evidence. We can't do these four things, so therefore, lack of evidence suggests therefore there's no, that's people from ignorance. That itself is a fallacy. So they claim to be very, very, like, we're rationalists and we're very, very, very intellectual and very, very, I think. So therefore there's no sign, there's no evidence for God, therefore we don't believe God can't be. We say, well, on your exact same premise, we can say here, there's no evidence for God not existing. Prove to me he doesn't exist. Because you're going to prove he doesn't exist if you don't istiqra of the entire creation. We've not even got. Have you seen those pictures, the last pictures that come up recently? So we live on a planet Earth. And in that picture that you had in NASA. So in those pictures, one pixel was a galaxy. Not even Earth. So one pixel was a galaxy which we reside in. And you saying you claiming there's no God. You saying there's no evidence. So you've done such an istiqra naqis, and on your istiqra naqis, you're being very proud that there's no evidence for him. So well, there's no evidence, it doesn't exist as well. So then the argument comes now, where does that burden of proof lie? That's what they would say, well, the next one. It is, a lot of these things, you can't, at the end of the day, you can't really convince somebody. All it is that when people put questions to you, you understand that the weakness of the question. But somebody doesn't want to believe, no matter what evidence you point for, they won't accept it. But sometimes what we learn is not the proof to them, they're not accept anyways. It's just to understand that your questions, some people get a bit shocked. How? There's no evidence for God. So yeah, there's no evidence, it doesn't exist as well. So you know that that question comes from a very weak standing. It's not somebody get really shocked that, oh, to answer this question, there's no evidence for him. So yeah, there's no evidence, it doesn't exist as well. So we're both equal. The same way before your question and after your question, there's no difference. Because your question itself is flawed. Because I have an exact counter argument which leaves us both in the same place. So a lot of these things, you have to convince somebody really who doesn't want you, what it's all to do, open their heart. But it's that you know how weak the arguments are and you don't really get confused or puzzled. And some people are weak in the mind, they get a bit baffled. So this is one argument. That there's no evidence, as an induction, according to your understanding, no evidence. And how much you have observed. And even that we don't accept what evidence means. You say evidence is only those things. We say, well, there's evidence. The khalq, the creation itself is evidence. So we say, well, the exact counter argument on the same thing is, there's no evidence, you have no evidence to prove he doesn't exist. So we're both the same. Yes? So that's induction. So again, deduction is analyzing top downwards. Meaning what? We understand the essence of this thing, and everything within that must fall under, because you can only be categorized in there if you possess these things. You understand? Yes? And induction is what? When you do what? Induction is when you analyze everything or what you have in front of you, and based on that. And obviously, the more you induce, the more elements you have, the more you've analyzed, the stronger your conclusion becomes. If you've got 1 million people in the world, and you analyze 2 people, it's a very weak induction. You analyze 700,000, 800,000, the stronger the induction becomes. But it's still not conclusive. So it's only when you get istiqra' tam, then it's conclusive. It gives you, the more percentage you have of istiqra', the stronger your evidence and your conclusion becomes. You got it? That's why, for example, psychology and all that, they have these things, but they keep changing. Because sometimes like you do an experiment or a research of some people, but it's only a certain group of people. So they try to do as many different people as possible, different backgrounds, but it's all on a certain group of people. You get what I'm saying? Sometimes they don't do an experiment in Europe or in America or about other parts of the world. So that's why a lot of these data and a lot of these analysis and these papers, they're flawed because it's an induction. And with more research and looking at more variables, things change. Yes? Subhanallah, bihamdi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.